Welcome back to another episode of the No Gray Areas podcast. As we approach Veterans Day, we want to take the time to express our gratitude to all the men and women who have served this country, fighting for the freedoms you and I have today. In this episode, we have the honor of sitting down with Dr. Dirk van Leenen, author and Holocaust survivor. We explore his one-of-a-kind survival journey, a story that will leave you with deep reflection and offer a new perspective on life's everyday moments. Let's get started. Dirk van Leenen, welcome to the No Gray Areas podcast. I am so privileged to have you here today. As I was telling you before we turned on the cameras and the mics, I'm a ferocious reader. I love reading all kinds of books, but especially history, and primarily history around World War II and the Holocaust.
Yes.
And so it is just an incredible honor to have you, as our audience can see if they're watching. We've got 3 books that you've written here. The first one, Resistance on a Bicycle, The Americans Are Coming, and The Last Train to the Concentration Camp. Those titles alone speak volumes. So let's go back to the beginning of the story.
Okay.
You were born in Holland, right?
Yes.
A little boy. When the Holocaust begins and the war begins, you're how old?
2 years.
You're 3 years old. Okay, and
little boy, amazingly smart.
Yeah.
Because when the soldiers came into our house, I was looking up to soldiers, their uniforms, their guns, and so they were starting to search our house. And I thought, oh, we're going to play a game of hide and seek. Maybe I can help them a little.
Yeah.
And my mother saw my hesitation and grabbed me, took me to another room and said, never tell the soldiers where our friends are because they're going to take them away.
Yeah. And when you say soldiers for our audience, you're talking about the Nazis.
The Nazis.
The Nazis are coming in. And your dad was actually part of the resistance movement.
He was the head of the resistance in the city of The Hague.
So head of the resistance, meaning he's helping hide the Jewish people.
That's correct.
Yeah, and moving them around.
Yes.
Incredibly dangerous then.
Very dangerous.
Yeah.
And it could only be done at night.
Yeah.
And it was curfew at night. So you couldn't be on the street. And that's when you had to move people.
Yeah. So you're, again, for our audience that's watching, they're not going to be able to see it, but you gave me a couple of articles. And there's a picture in this one of this little boy.
Yeah.
You're probably 4 years old at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, this little 4-year-old boy. And at that time then, your dad is managing the resistance movement in this city in Holland, risking his life and his family's life in many ways.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But you were actually part of that in some ways.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, he took me with him all the time on his bicycle. And there was a reason for it, because the resistance would create fake IDs for the Jewish people. Fake IDs were made by a little atelier, as it were, and we had to deliver those. But my father was stopped at every roadblock and frisked and interrogated. And if the interrogation went a little bad, he'd put his hand on his cheek, and it meant for me to create a scene. And I was very good at bawling.
You would just start crying?
Nazis, and the Nazis would come over, soldiers. They were fathers too sometimes. Mm-hmm. And a little boy crying. They came and they asked me, what's the matter?
Yeah.
And I would say, I am hungry.
Yeah.
Because I was always hungry.
Yeah.
And sometimes they gave me something to eat. But meanwhile, my father was frisked and interrogated. And then they would say, get out of here with that bawling kid.
Yeah.
But they didn't know that I was packed with all the counterfeit on my little body.
So you were carrying the counterfeit IDs?
Yes.
On you. They're frisking your dad.
Yes. Yeah.
That is incredible, because most of us at 4 years old are maybe going into kindergarten in a year or so. We're going to be learning our ABCs and 1, 2, 3s.
Yeah.
And you're traveling around with your dad as part of the resistance.
Yeah.
And he actually has a code for you. So when he puts his hand on his cheek, that was code for you to start bawling, start crying.
Right.
To hopefully move along the interrogation.
And it worked every time.
Wow. So what year was that? Was that Early 40s?
1943.
1943. Okay, so the war has another year and a half, 2 years
Yes.
left in it.
Yeah.
Okay. Then did your dad ever get caught? Did your family ever get caught?
Yes, at the very end. At the very end, there was a captain, a German captain, who was crazy. He was walking around his office saying, I need to catch that guy, I need to catch him. And he ordered trucks and soldiers to come, and they followed my father for 2 weeks everywhere where he went, because they wanted to catch him in the midst of a large group of Jews. And so finally they did. And my father was arrested. 72 Jews were arrested in that occasion and brought to the jail. My father was tortured for 5 days continually. And then they came to pick up my mother, and she took me with her because I couldn't be alone. We had people in the house, and it was too dangerous for me. So she took me with her, and I saw my father laying in a puddle of blood on the floor. And she had to clean him up, dress him up with fresh clothes. And when she was done, she said, okay, you can bring me home now. And they said, no, ma'am, you're going on the train tonight. And that's the third book, the last train to the concentration camp. 1-2 weeks before the entire war ended. This captain was crazy because he thought that he would get a promotion if he could get one more train load to a concentration camp. What he didn't even know was that the concentration camps were already closed. There was only one, and that was a holding camp, and that was a human shield for the Nazis for their equipment so the American bombers would not bomb that area.
Yeah.
And that's where we went, in Bergen-Belsen, in the north of Germany.
That was the last concentration camp that was, and they had already closed them down. How old were you then? About 6?
Yeah.
5, 6 years old?
Between 5 and 6.
Did you guys ever go home? When your dad was arrested and tortured and your mom goes and cleans him up, was it straight from there to the train?
Straight from there to the train. And we were put in a train car that normally holds 20 cows.
Yeah.
And they put 200 people in that car. We were pressed together. And the trip lasted 4 days and 4 nights.
On the train?
On the train. And we could not move our hands because we were packed together. And people died on that trip because they had to go to the bathroom or they throw up and they could not have enough oxygen with that many people in a closed environment. So when the train arrived in the camp, 30 dead bodies came out from among us.
So you're 5 or 6 years old, packed into this train car like cattle.
Yeah.
And people are dying around you.
Yes.
In fact, when you get to the camp, there's 30 bodies that come out of there.
That's right.
That's incredible.
I know.
To have to witness that at that age.
And I never forget it.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
And then in that camp,
yeah,
there were 60,000 people, and the Nazis did not have any food for them for the last 3 months. And people were dying, walking around like skeletons, falling down, and the Nazis simply put them on mountains, and everywhere were mountains of dead bodies. And in my little eyes of 5 years old, that has made an impression that's so incredible. I see it, the faces of the people.
At 5 or 6 years old, I was waking up on Saturday mornings and watching cartoons.
Yeah.
And you're in a concentration camp with mountains of dead bodies.
Right.
I can't imagine what that would do to a little boy.
Yeah.
And then, the other things you mentioned, seeing your dad after he'd been tortured. And Did you all come back from that concentration camp? Did your parents live through that?
Yes.
How long did your parents live after the war?
Very old.
Did they?
My father became 97 years old, and my mother 103.
What? So your dad lived to 97 and your mom
And
to
they
103?
always said, this is our reward, this long life and healthy long life.
And you were telling me you're Jewish
Yeah.
as well. So your parents are Jewish.
No.
No, they're not Jewish.
My mother was Jewish.
Your mother was Jewish. Okay.
And my father was a Gentile, and he married a Jewish girl, and she became a Christian.
What an amazing story, though, Dirk, that your dad then is a Gentile. He marries a Jew and then risks his life to hide Jews.
Yes.
And not just his life, but his family's life.
That's
again,
right.
which is,
Oh, yeah.
As a very famous speaker said, there's no greater love than this, than a person lay down his life for another, right?
That
Jesus said
is
those
one
words
of the
2,000 years
titles
ago.
I use for my talks.
Is it really?
Yeah, no greater love.
Yeah. And you witnessed that. Like you saw your parents actually living that out.
Absolutely.
And in some ways you as a little boy did.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably didn't realize the depth of what you were part of.
No.
But you too were laying down your life to save others.
Yeah. Actually, I thought it was exciting. It was like a big game.
Yeah.
And to me as a little boy,
Yeah.
I didn't feel the threat as much as later.
Yeah. When was later? When did you start feeling the threats?
After I started the school again after the war in 1946, 7, I felt so horrible, so threatened. I was afraid for every military uniform that I saw.
Yeah. Did the anti-Semitism, was it still alive and well after the war? Did you see that?
No. In fact, the Dutch population was very caring to the Jews, very much.
Yeah. How long were you in the concentration camp then?
Only 2 days.
2 days.
Then the camp was closed. The Allied troops, the British, came and closed the camp and arrested the Nazis. And then they started serving the people. They came with hundreds of trucks with loads and loads of medications and food and medical equipment and people.
Yeah.
And started catering. And yet, out of the 60,000, 30 died.
30,000.
30,000
Half of them died. Wow.
Because they had not had food, and when they gave them food, they couldn't. Their inside was dead.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Wow. So let me go back to the books that are here, and for our audience that's actually watching, they're standing up here. But the first one you wrote is called The Resistance on a Bicycle.
That's right.
And that goes back to you and your dad.
Yeah.
Your dad managing and running the resistance, but you're a little 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old boy riding around with your dad, part of that.
Yeah.
You're actually carrying the IDs.
Yeah.
The fake IDs.
And the fake food stamps as well.
Any idea the number of people that were potentially saved by that work?
My father and mother were called to come to a party after the war, a year after the war. And there were 800 people that had come through our house. But there were probably about 1,200 people that went through our house. They didn't come to that particular party.
Yeah.
But they had gifts of whatever they could give, and the whole stage was full of boxes, and I had a whale of a time to check out what was in it.
I bet you did. But man, as you grew older and became an adult, I imagine it had a profound impact on you to realize, because at 6 years old, you don't realize the depth of what your parents were doing.
No.
When did that start to dawn on you?
Pretty close to the beginning of the liberation.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't buy anything yet.
Yeah.
I needed shoes. My shoes in that picture, my shoes were so worn out that I had to get paper in my shoes every day. And so you could not buy new shoes. The stores were empty. Our house was ransacked by the traitors in Holland. And we had to buy material to fix it up again.
So when you were taken away to the concentration camp, the traders came in and just basically destroyed
Tore
your home?
out everything. And they had warehouses full of building materials. And my father one day said just 3 days after we arrived, we need to go to the hardware store and get some nails. So we went to the hardware store, and the man said, we have no nails, and we won't have any nails because the Nazis took the factories and the machinery and the steel, and they are not being able to make any nails nor for the next 6 months. And so I heard that, and I was only 5 or just 6 years old, and I knew we had an old claw hammer, and I found it in the backyard. I put a stem on it with my little fingers, and I went to the bombed out houses in the street, and because I always saw wood beams with nails sticking out, and I started pulling the nails.
Wow.
And that first night, I had a handful of nails, and I came home, and I said to my dad, here are your nails. If you want more, they're 10 cents a piece.
You are a little entrepreneur, huh? Wow. Did you actually make him pay you for the nails?
No. Not him, but I kept
Did you start
pulling
selling
nails every day, and I brought them to the hardware store, and they paid me 10
They paid
cents.
you. Wow. That's amazing. Well, Dirk, when did it start, though, for you? I'm assuming you became an adult before you began to realize the enormity and the depth of what your family had been involved in.
Yes.
When was that? Did that hit you, the reality of that?
Yeah, when I went to high school, I felt that I was different than all the other kids.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of history to think about, and they asked me about. And the teacher asked me one day to write an essay on the war. And I wrote a 40-page essay. And the teacher never seen that before, 40 pages of an essay.
Yeah.
And I read the whole essay at the assembly of the school.
Yeah.
And then, and from then on, I always felt that I had to tell people about food, for instance. Food was so scarce that from then on, I never, ever leave food on my plate at the end. And my grandchildren do. And I tell them my story again, why it's so precious to eat your food. Don't throw it away.
We take a lot of things for granted if we haven't gone through something like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So this second book you wrote then, The Americans Are Coming. Why that title?
Hey, we hope you've enjoyed this episode so far. Be sure to like and subscribe to not miss a future podcast. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
So this second book you wrote then, The Americans Are Coming. Why that title?
The title is because whenever something bad happened during the wartime, the people would sigh and say, but the Americans are coming. And that was happening after the 14th of July in 1944.
Yeah.
And so since then, they said that. That was their big sigh and their answer, their hope that the Americans would be coming. And it took more than 9 months before they really came to Holland.
Yeah.
They came and were fighting in France and in Germany and everywhere, but not in Holland yet.
So as a little boy, you're hearing that sigh.
Yeah.
Almost, but the Americans are coming. Like it was a sigh of hope. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
What, take us back. What was it like the first time then you saw an American soldier? Because you're saying that the uniform, a military uniform, was something that you almost became scared of because of the Nazis.
Correct.
What was that like when you first saw a uniform that wasn't
exhilarating because they came with jeeps and trucks and full of people, and all the citizens would be taken on the truck driving with them. It was hilarious, but celebrating.
Yeah.
It was happy.
It's like a big parade going through the town with the military vehicles.
Yeah.
Did you get to ride on
the
one of the trucks?
No, I didn't. I was too young. But they're
You're probably still on a bike again, huh?
Girls, the soldiers liked, of course, and a lot of Dutch girls later married American soldiers.
Yeah. I imagine that must have been just crazy though to go from,
Oh, yeah.
like as you said, being fearful of a military uniform because you saw the Nazis and what
Yeah.
you had witnessed them doing, and then to all of a sudden have a uniform not represent fear but hope.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the third book, then you referenced that the last train on the way to the concentration camp.
Yeah.
That's because you were literally on the last train
Yeah.
that they ever took.
Yeah. I created something unique in this book. I made 10 pages black pages. And on the pages is the picture of a train car. That's where we were in, and we were in the darkest of the train and the nights.
Yeah.
And so then on those pages are some of the remarks that people made in the train. Like, I can't hold it any longer. Oh, I need, and all those kind of remarks. But also, one Jewish person started singing a very famous song, very famous Jewish song. And that's in that book too.
What was the name of the song? Do you remember? Or maybe some of the words of it?
The words are the song is called the Unitanev Tokev. And he sang the song, here's all these pages, but he sang the song here once a while, a couple of sentences.
Yeah.
But the sentences were so impactful. One of them, who will live and who will die? Who in their time and who not on their time? Who by fire or by water or by sword or by beast or by hunger or thirst? That was all surrounding those people, and he was singing that song.
Singing it in the
And
darkness of the
people
train
joined. Yeah, people joined in.
Wow. Wow. So as a little boy, you're in this train car. It's pitch black.
It's pitch black,
And you're hearing phrases
can't
like, I can't
move.
hold it anymore.
yeah, they're there on the pages
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. So this, by the way, how creative to do this in this book. But yeah, I see, for the audience that's listening, I'm looking at this page and it's black, like you're saying, and there's a picture of the old train, day one, night one, and then there's these little quotes. Too many of us can't breathe. How long is this going to take? I can't move. My whole body is hurting. I am thirsty. I can't sleep this way. These are all phrases you're hearing as a little 6-year-old boy.
Yeah, yeah,
I turn the page, day 2. I can't hold it any longer. Crying. If they would just stop for a bathroom break. They're stopping now. Who will live and who will die? How can the Nazis do this to us? You heard praying.
yeah,
Wow. I turn the page again. This is day 3, night 3. We're stopping here for at least 5 hours. What a cruel treatment. Crying, cursing, singing. Where are we? I can't bear this any longer. We're moving again. Sorry, I'm choking from the smell in here. Wow.
yeah. That's a picture of what really happened.
Yeah. How did this affect you later in life? You've lived quite a number of decades now since then.
Yeah. Since that essay at high school when I was 14, I was totally wanting to tell people. So I started doing talks, I started writing short essays and gave it to people. And every time I was involved in letting people know.
Yeah.
Up to this day.
Yeah.
Every day.
What do you think it was at 14 years and now all these years later? What was it that made you want to get this story out to let people know?
The lack of freedom, the lack of food, the lack of space, the lack of comfort, lack of buying anything. I have a little funny story. When I was 4 years old, 6 years old, I went to kindergarten. And at December 5 is when St. Nicholas comes to Holland.
Mm-hmm.
Sinterklaas, they call him. And the teacher said to the kids, if you bring a little bag of sugar, I will make sugar cane for you. And I had to get it from my mother, and it was hard because you could not buy anything yet.
Mm.
So I brought it, and when the day came, the teacher said to me, "You cannot stay here. You need to go outside because you didn't bring your sugar." I did, absolutely did.
Mm.
And so she sent me outside, and I never forget that.
Wow.
That was so mean.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't know that was a funny story.
No.
It sounds like more of a sad story. Wow.
Yeah.
So you've spent your life sharing this. In fact, before we turned the cameras on and the mics on, I found out that you ended up graduating with a doctorate
Yeah.
from the University of Holland
Yeah.
in horticulture, correct?
Yes.
And then you worked for the United Nations for a couple of decades.
Yep.
Traveling around the world somewhat, helping
Right.
other countries learn how to grow flowers and plants. And
Yeah.
so amazing. But in all of that, you were still trying to take every opportunity you could to tell the story.
Absolutely.
What do you say to people? Because this is so sad to me that we've had, in fact, it's been going on for a few decades now,
Yeah.
where some are saying, well, that never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you say to someone who would claim that the Holocaust never happened? That it was some kind of conspiracy made up?
I had my book, Resistance on a Bicycle, in the back of my car. And I picked up two guys that wanted to go to the airport.
Yeah.
And they saw that book and they say, "Oh, you're a Nazi," because of the...
Yeah. Yeah.
And they started harassing me, saying, "Oh, you're a Nazi, and Trump, what do you think of Trump? He's a Nazi too." I slammed on my brake and said, "Get out," right on the freeway. Get out. So that's my reaction.
Yeah. You're not a...
That's absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
And that's happening at the universities with all these rioters.
It is.
And that is because they have not read my books.
Yeah. Yeah.
And any history is hardly taught in schools anymore.
You know, Dirk, when I was in Rwanda, it's in East Africa, and you remember the Rwanda Genocide of 1994 was a terrible, terrible thing. You know, in about 90 days, 1 million people were slaughtered.
Yeah.
And I went to the Genocide Museum, Genocide Memorial, one of them that's there. And there was probably about as big of the size of this room that we're sitting in right here. And they said that there was like 20,000 bodies buried underneath there because they were just having to. But then they had all these pictures as you went through, and they were talking about the different genocides that had happened.
Oh, yeah.
And you went back to the genocide that you actually lived through, the Holocaust, World War II. And after that, there was that famous line, someone said, "Never again."
Yeah.
And the sad thing was, as I walked through, I saw that one, and then I walked and I saw a genocide that took place somewhere in the world in the late 40s, and then in the 50s, and then the 60s, and then the 70s, and the 80s. And it's like every decade we have
Till now.
Yeah, and we have them going on right now in Sudan and other parts of the world. So it is such an important message, like you're saying.
Absolutely.
Someone like yourself who survived that. I would highly recommend our audience. I'm going to ask you to share where they could get these books. If they like to read, to grab one of these books, read about it. This is history. This really happened.
That's right.
And these kind of horrific things are still happening in our world.
Absolutely.
And we can't turn a blind eye.
No.
Your dad could have. I suppose he could have just said, well, we're going to hunker down and do our best to save my family.
Yeah. No.
But he was willing to risk his life and his family's life. And you said 1,200 at least people survived because of that. Yeah. But that's a great picture of what true love is.
That's right.
Laying down your life for another, of fighting for justice.
Yeah.
Justice is the way things ought to be or should be.
Yeah.
Right. And so you experienced that as a little boy. So how would people get a hold of your books or get a hold of you?
The best way is my phone number.
Okay.
480-512-9757.
Okay.
And then I mail them to people, signed copies.
Yeah.
And that's the best way to get them.
Yeah. I mean, to me, what a treasure to have a signed copy of a book like this. Someone like yourself that experienced and survived something like this, And then to have, I mean, your parents, they're heroes,
Yeah,
aren't they?
were.
I
Absolutely.
mean, to you, they were just mom and dad.
Well,
But eventually you probably came to realize they were heroes.
yeah, they were. And they did something that is very interesting. Because one day, a month after the war ended, people from the government in Holland came to our house. And they interviewed my parents, and they said, you need to come to that and that address, and you're going to get an award, a medal. My parents, at the same time, in harmony, said, absolutely not. We did not do this to get a medal. We don't want a medal. Then we got letters out of Jerusalem to put their name in the archives there. Same thing. They said, absolutely not. Our reward is our age and our life.
Wow. Dirk, I was in that museum in Jerusalem that you're talking about. And again, another, like, if you can walk through that museum and not break down a couple of times crying, you're lacking human empathy for sure.
Yeah.
But how amazed. I mean, this is why it's such an honor to sit here with you, because like I said, I've read so many books about this time in history. I've walked through museums, and then to think that your parents' names could have been on that wall in Jerusalem of that museum I walked through, but they said, we're not. That's not why we did it.
No.
That's not why we did it. But man.
As we're wrapping up this episode, be sure to leave us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment on something you'll take away. All right, let's hop back into the remainder of the episode.
You know, I, along with our audience, just sit here with you and say, what an honor to meet you. What an honor to know that your parents were heroes like that. And you, as a little boy, didn't even realize that you were quite the hero too.
Yeah.
Acting it up by crying and carrying these the fake IDs. And I mean, how incredible. We're playing hide and seek and watching cartoons on Saturday, and you were doing it for real.
Yeah.
The hide and seek for real. So amazing. Yeah. So we have your phone number. You're still involved with things. We're sitting here in Phoenix. In fact, I think this podcast is going to drop in October. But about a couple weeks ago in September, they were doing the Anne Frank play here, and you were part of all of that. Again, tell us about that a little bit.
The play is professional in Herberger Theater the whole month of September. The play portrays the life of Anne Frank and how they were betrayed. And then at the end of the play, I come on the stage, be introduced as a Holocaust survivor. And then I tell them what they saw on the stage happened to me too.
Yeah.
And then we have a question and answering time.
What's one of the most interesting questions you've ever been asked when you do those kind of things? You speak in schools. Yeah. You do things that you were doing.
Well, very simple is always, why do you do this? Because I spend time, drive, spend money. Well, I have a very good reason. Because I survived it.
Yeah.
And that's why I want others to know.
Yeah. Dirk, I think your story too is such a reminder. I was just talking to my wife about this the other night, and I said, I think we make two mistakes as humans. Either we don't recognize the inherent good in humans. Like you walk down the street and you just realize so many people do so many great things, so many good things, and we miss that. Or the other extreme is we don't realize how evil humans can be.
Yeah.
And you in these books, in your story, in your life experience, witnessed at the same time the most beautiful side of humanity, where your parents and others in the resistance were willing to lay down their life for other human beings. But then you also witnessed the depth of depravity of humanity as well, right? You saw them both at the same time.
Yeah.
How did that affect you as a human being then? You see that as a child. How did that affect you and how you viewed humanity and how you viewed God?
At the moment, I really see the wastefulness of everything, of life, of food, of spending money on nonsensical stuff. That is so bad.
So right now, where you're at in life, one of the things that you're looking at is it just seems like we're wasting so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. wasting time and wasting money and wasting everything.
Well, that's where that changes the lens you look to for the rest of your life, right? Because I grew up, my grandparents were born during the Depression, and then they my grandpa actually was part of flying planes in World War II, and he was over in the Pacific region fighting there. But my grandparents lived completely different than most of us do because they lived through the Depression.
Yeah.
So they saw the value of things, and that's what you're saying, right?
That's right.
You witness when you don't have enough food, when you can't even get nails to hang sheetrock or whatever you need to hang in your home, and you saw the value of that. And so you see the sadness of wasting then.
Yeah.
Well, man, again, thank you. Honor your parents. I sure wish I could have met them. It would have been an honor to meet them. But I'm sitting here with a hero and a guy that had two parents as heroes. Again, we'll have the way for people to connect with you. Yeah. And I would highly recommend our audience to grab a couple of these books. And you're saying that if they call you, you'll give them a signed copy, or they can purchase a signed copy from you. Right. So, Dirk, thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining us today. Let's remember the importance of honoring history and ensuring stories like Dirk's are never forgotten. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories of perseverance and courage. From all of us at No Gray Areas, have a safe and healthy Veterans Day. We'll see you next time.